It was a dreary autumn evening when Officer Gideon Corbin began his shift, the city streets slick with rain and illuminated by the wavering glow of streetlights. As he cruised along the narrow, winding roads of a small, weathered town, every raindrop that fell seemed to echo with secrets of the past. The rhythmic sound of the wipers against the windshield was a constant companion, yet in the midst of that steady drizzle, a sudden flash of light caught his eye, a car, moving with an urgency that defied the gentle pace of the night. Gideon eased his patrol car to the shoulder, his heart quickening as the speeding vehicle drew closer. The headlights, almost desperate in their brightness, cut through the mist, and for a moment, everything else faded into insignificance. His training and instinct took over as he activated the siren, a piercing sound that shattered the quiet murmur of the rain. In that instant, time seemed to slow down, and as he watched the car veer slightly, his thoughts raced with both caution and an unexplainable anticipation. Pulling alongside the vehicle, Gideon maintained a calm exterior despite the growing sense of foreboding inside him. The rhythmic pounding of rain on the car roof mirrored his pounding heart, yet he focused intently on the task at hand. He signaled for the driver to pull over, and within moments the car coasted to a stop by the side of the road, its engine now a low, reluctant hum. The officer stepped out into the rain, the cool droplets mingling with the warm determination in his eyes. Every step toward the vehicle was measured, as if he were approaching a scene he'd long feared but could no longer ignore. The driver, a middle-aged man with an uneasy expression and trembling hands, fumbled with the door handle as if trying to escape the inevitable confrontation. But what struck Gideon even more was the glimpse he caught through the slightly ajar rear window, a little girl, huddled in the back seat, her eyes wide and brimming with a sorrow that seemed too heavy for her tender years. The girl's presence sent a jolt through him, her gaze was not just one of fear, but of deep, unspoken pain. In that split second, the details of the scene, the rain, the darkness, the glistening street, transformed into a narrative of desperate vulnerability. Gideon's mind began to churn with questions. Who was this child? Why was she alone in a car with a man who appeared as frightened as she was? As he reached the vehicle, the rhythmic patter of rain seemed to intensify, as if nature itself was urging him to tread carefully. The driver's voice was shaky and tentative when he finally spoke, barely audible over the sound of the storm. He claimed that everything was fine, that there was merely a misunderstanding about the speed. Yet the truth lay hidden behind his quivering words and the haunted eyes that darted nervously between the front seat and the back. Standing at the open door, Gideon took a deep breath, allowing the chill of the rain to steady his resolve. His gaze moved gently toward the rear seat, where the little girl sat silently, her small hands clutching a faded stuffed animal as if it were her only anchor in a world gone awry. The sight of her evoked memories of lost innocence and the countless lives that had been affected by circumstances beyond control. Every detail of that moment, the slick, rain-soaked pavement, the soft glow of distant streetlights, the subtle trembling of the vehicle, seemed to converge into a singular, heart-wrenching tableau of vulnerability in latent danger. In that extended moment of stillness, Gideon realized that this encounter was not a mere routine stop, it was the beginning of something far more complex and haunting. The rain, the darkness, and even the whispered wind through the barren trees outside bore witness to the fragile line between safety and peril. With measured calm, he carefully approached the child, his voice gentle yet firm, ensuring she felt neither threatened nor ignored. As he knelt down to speak with her, his words carried the weight of compassion and a silent promise of protection. There was a determination in his eyes, a resolve that whatever hidden story lay behind those trembling eyes, he would not rest until he uncovered the truth. Every moment in that rain-drenched encounter seemed laden with significance, a delicate balance between duty and empathy. Officer Gideon Corbin sensed that beneath the veneer of this seemingly ordinary night lay a tangled web of secrets and past regrets. The encounter with the little girl was not random, it was a collision of destinies, a poignant reminder that even in the harshest storms, a spark of hope could illuminate the darkness. And as the rain continued to fall steadily, washing away the grime of a troubled world, Gideon felt a stirring within him, a mixture of dread and hope, knowing that this was just the beginning of a story that would test the limits of courage, compassion, and the unyielding quest for redemption. After the initial shock subsided, Officer Gideon Corbin remained by the car, his eyes fixed on the little girl in the back seat. The vehicle sat silent in the downpour as if holding its breath, every droplet of rain echoing the quiet tension of the scene. Gideon's heart pounded in his chest while he slowly approached the driver's side, careful not to startle either the man or the child further. Inside the car, the driver, who had earlier identified himself as Tad Fontaine, fumbled with the door, his face drawn and anxious. His eyes darted between the raindrops sliding down the window and the pleading, distant gaze of the little girl. Gideon's steady, measured voice broke the silence as he asked for Tad's identification and an explanation for why a child of such fragile appearance was alone in the vehicle. Tad's words were halting and uncertain. He claimed that Zephyra had been his responsibility for the evening, insisting that she was simply resting after a long day. Yet, every nuance in his tone suggested something more, a concealed truth or a desperate attempt to cover up an uncomfortable reality. Gideon's attention shifted to Zephyra, who sat in the back seat with her gaze fixed on a small, worn-out teddy bear. Her eyes, large and luminous in the dim interior light, told stories of sleepless nights and whispered fears. As the officer knelt beside her, he maintained a gentle distance, offering soft, reassuring words. Slowly, she lifted her eyes to meet his, and for a fleeting moment, he saw in them an echo of untold secrets and sorrow. Though the child's lips remained sealed, her silence spoke volumes, and it was in that silence that Gideon sensed the weight of her unspoken plea for help. In the ensuing minutes, as the rain continued its relentless cadence, Gideon's questions hung in the air like fragile bubbles, waiting to burst into revelations. He invited both Zephyra and Tad to sit with him outside the car under the sparse shelter of a nearby overhang. The cold night air was filled with the mingling scents of wet asphalt and distant pine, creating an atmosphere both melancholic and strangely comforting. There, beneath the quivering neon light of a malfunctioning street lamp, the trio found themselves locked in a delicate, silent standoff between truth and deception. Tad's eyes betrayed his internal conflict. His hands trembled as he clutched a crumpled envelope, a detail that did not escape Gideon's notice. The envelope, edged with the wear of time, seemed to contain remnants of a life that Tad was eager to hide. With every hesitant breath, it became clear that Tad's narrative was layered with inconsistencies. The officer gently pressed for clarity, his tone both firm and empathetic. Tad, caught between the desire to trust and the fear of repercussions, began to reveal bits of a story that grew darker with each word. He admitted that Zephyra was not merely a child under his care, but someone whose life had been marked by a series of misfortunes, an existence that had spiraled into a realm where hope was a scarce commodity. As the conversation deepened, Zephyra's demeanor shifted subtly. Her silence transformed from one of fear to a guarded vigilance, as if she were measuring the sincerity of every word spoken around her. Gideon's instincts, honed by years of navigating human frailty and deceit, urged him to delve further into her quiet distress. He inquired gently about her name and her feelings, each question carefully crafted to coax out fragments of a story without overwhelming her. In a voice barely above a whisper, she murmured her name, Zephyra Monroe, a name that resonated with both grace and an unexpected heaviness, as if it carried the legacy of a past far too burdensome for someone so young. The night wore on, and under the relentless patter of rain, a fragile rapport began to form among the trio. Gideon's compassionate demeanor and unwavering resolve provided a beacon of hope amidst the murky uncertainty. As he listened to Tad's hesitant confessions and observed Zephyra's shifting expressions, the officer's mind raced with questions. Who had abandoned her to such peril? Why was there so much fear etched into her delicate features? And what secrets lay buried within the crumpled envelope that Tad clutched like a lifeline? Every detail of that rain-soaked encounter, from the flickering streetlights to the hesitant cadence of spoken words, painted a portrait of a night that was far from ordinary. It was a night that bore the silent testimony of lives intertwined by fate, a narrative where the truth was as elusive as the mist that blanketed the ground. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, Officer Gideon Corbin vowed that he would not allow this case to fade into obscurity. With the storm slowly abating and the promise of a new day emerging, he resolved to protect Zephyr at all costs and uncover the hidden truths that had brought her into his life on that fateful, rain-drenched evening. In the aftermath of that rain-drenched encounter, Officer Gideon Corbin found himself unable to shake the haunting image of Zephyr's sorrowful eyes. Back at the precinct, the echoes of that night reverberated in his mind as he sat at his desk, the remnants of the envelope, crumpled, aged, and fragile, spread before him like a portal to a hidden past. Carefully unfolding the brittle paper, he discovered faded photographs and a handwritten letter that bore the unmistakable marks of time and hardship. The ink, nearly smudged by age, spelled out names and secrets that hinted at a tragic legacy. Among those names was one that struck him with profound familiarity: Ephraim Steele. The mention of this name resonated deeply, as if it were the key to unlocking the mystery that had unexpectedly landed on his doorstep. Gideon spent long hours under the harsh glow of a single desk lamp, meticulously examining every detail. The letter was a labyrinth of cryptic messages, recounting a story of broken promises, clandestine meetings, and betrayals that spanned generations. It spoke of a family once bound by love and honor, now shattered by forces far more sinister than mere neglect. Each carefully penned line seemed to lament lost opportunities and the silent screams of those who had been wronged. As he pieced together the fragmented clues, the faded photographs revealed moments of fragile happiness, smiling faces in a long-forgotten era that contrasted starkly with the sorrow etched into Zephyr's delicate features. Driven by a sense of duty that transcended routine law enforcement, Gideon reached out to an old friend and retired detective, Julianne Thorne. Known for her unparalleled expertise in cold cases and a reputation for unraveling the threads of long-forgotten mysteries, Julianne listened intently as he recounted the details of the envelope and the unnerving circumstances of that fateful night. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she recalled a similar case from decades past, one that ended in silence and unresolved grief. Julianne's recollections suggested that Zephyr's predicament was not an isolated incident but rather a tragic echo of past events, a tapestry of hidden wounds passed down like a cursed inheritance. Over the following days, Officer Corbin delved deeper into the archives of his department, scouring old records and piecing together fragments of information. Every detail added weight to the theory that Zephyr's life was entangled with a web of betrayal and forgotten promises. The documents hinted at secret meetings in abandoned warehouses and covert operations that had been swept under the rug by those with power. Gideon's investigation revealed that the envelope was not merely a collection of random mementos, it was a carefully constructed breadcrumb trail left by someone who had once dared to defy a corrupt system. With each new piece of evidence, the picture grew more intricate and heart-wrenching, a legacy of pain and resilience that demanded justice. Sitting alone in his dimly lit office, with the constant hum of the city outside and the rhythmic patter of rain against the window, Gideon felt the immense burden of his responsibility. The envelope and its contents were not just relics of a forgotten past, they were a call to action, a promise that those who had suffered in silence would not be forgotten. Each photograph, each carefully faded line of ink, whispered stories of lost innocence and the quiet desperation of souls who had once been hopeful. In that solitary moment, Gideon vowed to himself that he would follow the trail wherever it led. He would seek out every hidden detail, every whisper of truth, until the wounds of the past were finally exposed and given a chance to heal. The investigation, now charged with a personal intensity, took on the weight of redemption. For Officer Corbin, the case was no longer a matter of routine protocol, it was a mission to right the wrongs that had festered in the shadows for far too long. As the hours turned into days, the evidence slowly wove itself into a tapestry of forgotten pain and buried secrets. Gideon's determination grew with every discovery, and the promise of bringing light to a long-hidden darkness became the driving force of his relentless pursuit of justice. Gideon's investigation led him down a labyrinth of forgotten records and long-forgotten memories. Determined to unravel the threads of a legacy steeped in sorrow and betrayal, he found himself at the entrance of an old, abandoned municipal archive, a building whose crumbling facade echoed decades of neglect. The structure, once a proud repository of history, now lay in disrepair, its silent halls filled with dust and secrets. Inside, the dim light of his flashlight danced over rows of yellowed files and brittle documents, each one a potential clue to the mystery of Zephyr's past. As he sifted through stacks of records, a series of photographs and handwritten logs caught his eye. Among them were images of a family whose smiles belied the hidden anguish of their lives. One photograph, in particular, depicted a man with kind yet sorrowful eyes, a man whose name was inscribed on the back, Ephraim Steele. The discovery sent a shiver down Gideon's spine. Ephraim's name had appeared in the faded letter from the envelope, a spectral reminder of a past that had left deep, unhealed wounds. The photographs, accompanied by personal notes and receipts from long-closed businesses, painted a picture of a time when trust was a fragile commodity and every promise made was soon forgotten. For hours, Gideon meticulously cross-referenced dates and names, piecing together an intricate timeline. His heart pounded as he realized that the story of Ephraim Steele was interwoven with that of Zephyr's family, a connection obscured by years of silence and deliberate concealment. The records revealed that Ephraim had once been a prominent figure in the community, a man of unwavering principles who had fought against corruption and injustice. Yet, as the trail of documents grew colder, it became evident that his defiance had come at a steep price. His disappearance, shrouded in mystery, had sparked whispers of betrayal from those who wielded power in the shadows. Gideon's pulse quickened as he discovered a series of confidential memos that alluded to covert meetings in hidden rooms behind the old building's walls. The memos mentioned a secret network, one that had orchestrated the downfall of honest men like Ephraim. With each new piece of evidence, the scale of the conspiracy seemed to expand, linking not only to the powerful figures in town but also hinting at a long-standing feud that had torn families apart. The documents suggested that the very forces that had silenced Ephraim were still active, their influence seeping into the present and endangering the innocent. In the midst of this discovery, Gideon came across a particularly fragile ledger, its pages nearly disintegrated by time. The ledger detailed financial transactions that, at first glance, appeared benign. However, upon closer inspection, they revealed a clandestine pattern, a web of illicit payments that hinted at blackmail, coercion, and betrayal. Every entry was a small window into a dark world where power was bought and sold, and where loyalty was as transient as the autumn leaves outside. The ledger made it clear that Zephyr's suffering was not an isolated event, it was part of a continuum, a painful legacy of a community long corrupted by greed and deceit. With the weight of these revelations pressing upon him, Gideon felt the crushing burden of responsibility. The silence of the archive was broken only by the soft rustling of paper and the distant, mournful call of a night bird. He knew that these records, though fragile, held the key to understanding the full extent of the betrayal that had marked the lives of those connected to Zephyr. Every word, every faded signature in the ledger, was a piece of a puzzle that spanned generations. The deeper he delved, the more he realized that uncovering the truth would not only bring justice for Ephraim and his family but might also save Zephyr from the same fate. In that quiet, somber place, Gideon made a silent vow. He would follow the trail of evidence, no matter how convoluted or dangerous it might become. The archive, with its hidden truths and long-buried secrets, was not just a repository of the past, it was a beacon guiding him toward a future where the innocent could finally be shielded from the dark forces that had haunted this town for far too long. As he carefully gathered the documents into a secure case, Gideon felt both the sting of sorrow and the fierce heat of determination. Each fragile page was a testament to the resilience of those who had fought for justice, and he knew that by preserving their story, he might just pave the way for a new dawn of hope. Gideon's investigation had reached a point where the whispers of the past and the present collided in a dangerous intersection of fate. Following the trail of the ledger and other cryptic documents, he received an anonymous tip pointing him toward an old industrial complex on the outskirts of town, a sprawling warehouse district long abandoned by legitimate enterprises but now known to shelter those who thrived in the shadows. As dusk melted into a deep, velvety night, Gideon drove his patrol car along winding, desolate roads, the only sound the steady hum of his engine and the distant echo of urban decay. The warehouse loomed before him like a fortress of forgotten secrets, its rusted metal and shattered glass windows bearing silent testimony to years of neglect and illicit dealings. As he parked in a shadowed lot, his pulse quickened with a mix of apprehension and resolve. He could sense that the answers he desperately sought were hidden behind those crumbling walls, guarded by men and women whose allegiance was as unpredictable as the flickering neon sign that once heralded the building's glory days. Stepping cautiously into the building, Gideon's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing graffiti-scarred walls, abandoned crates, and scattered remnants of a life once lived. Every step echoed, and the sound of his boots against the concrete floor created a rhythm that matched the pounding of his heart. He moved with deliberate care, knowing that at any moment he might be intruding upon a scene where the line between friend and foe was blurred. It was in a narrow corridor at the rear of the warehouse that he first encountered her. A figure stood partially concealed by a rusted metal door, her presence almost ghost-like amid the decaying surroundings. As Gideon approached, the figure turned slowly, revealing the striking features of a woman whose eyes burned with determination and a history of hard-won battles. She introduced herself as Odelia Raven, a name that resonated with both elegance and an air of enigma. Her voice was calm yet edged with a hint of defiance, and as she spoke, every word hinted at a past marred by betrayal and a present committed to the pursuit of justice. Odelia explained that she had once been part of the very network that now operated from within these walls. She had seen firsthand the corruption that had claimed countless lives, including those connected to the long-forgotten legacy of Ephraim Steele. With a measured tone, she recounted how her own journey had taken her from the inner circles of a criminal organization to the realization that the system she had once served was built on deception and cruelty. She had since chosen to walk a path of redemption, gathering evidence and allies to dismantle the corrupt syndicate piece by piece. Her eyes, filled with both regret and fierce determination, met Gideon's as if to silently vow that the sins of the past would no longer be tolerated. Together, they navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the warehouse, exchanging cautious words and piecing together the intricate connections between the documents Gideon had uncovered and the underworld operations that Odelia was intimately familiar with. She revealed that the warehouse was not merely a hideout, it was the nerve center of an underground network that had orchestrated a series of crimes stretching back decades. Each clandestine meeting, every covert transaction, had been carefully recorded and hidden away in ledgers and secret memos, much like those Gideon had found in the archive. The scale of the conspiracy began to emerge before them, an intricate web spun by powerful figures who had manipulated events from the shadows. As they delved deeper, Odelia led Gideon to a concealed room behind a false wall, a small, dimly lit office cluttered with discarded files, old computers, and faded photographs of men and women whose lives had been swallowed by the darkness of their schemes. Here, among the relics of past transgressions, they found more evidence linking the criminal network to the fate of Ephraim Steele and, by extension, to the troubled history of Zephyr's family. Odelia's fingers trembled slightly as she ran them over a photograph of a stern-faced man, a man whose presence loomed large in the narrative of betrayal and loss. Her voice, when she spoke of him, was heavy with sorrow and a silent promise of retribution. In that claustrophobic room, time seemed to slow as Gideon absorbed every detail, every whispered secret that Odelia revealed. The pieces of the puzzle began to interlock, painting a picture of a community ensnared by a corrupt system that preyed on the vulnerable. Despite the danger that lurked in every shadow, the two forged an uneasy alliance, bound by a mutual desire to dismantle the sinister forces that had cast long, dark shadows over so many lives. By the time they emerged from the warehouse, the night had deepened into an inky blackness punctuated only by the distant hum of city lights. Gideon's mind was alive with the magnitude of what lay ahead, a relentless pursuit of justice that would demand every ounce of courage and perseverance he possessed. Yet, in the quiet intensity of that dangerous intersection, a spark of hope had been kindled. Together with Odelia, He felt a renewed sense of purpose, one that promised to bring the buried truths into the light and to free the innocent from the oppressive grip of a legacy steeped in corruption and despair. Gideon's resolve hardened into an unbreakable shield as he took decisive action to protect Zephyr from the ever-looming threat that had haunted her life. In the quiet hours of a bitterly cold morning, while the town still slumbered beneath a blanket of mist and uncertainty, he gathered a small group of trusted allies, fellow officers who had long witnessed the scars left by a corrupt system and a reformed insider whose insights proved invaluable. Together, they met in a nondescript safe house on the edge of town, a modest building that exuded warmth and quiet determination despite its plain exterior. Inside that room, lit by the soft glow of a single desk lamp and the steady hum of an old heater, plans were drawn with meticulous care. Gideon laid out the evidence he had collected over the past weeks, faded photographs, torn fragments of letters, and the intricate ledger that mapped out a sinister network of deceit. Every detail was scrutinized, every connection debated. The atmosphere was heavy with the understanding that they were not merely preparing for a routine operation, they were preparing to confront an enemy whose tendrils reached into every dark corner of the community. At the center of this strategy was Zephyr, whose fragile presence belied a strength that had survived unthinkable hardships. With tenderness and careful deliberation, Gideon explained the plan to her in a voice that blended firmness with reassurance. He promised that she would be shielded from harm, that she was not alone in this struggle, and that every measure was being taken to dismantle the dangerous web that had ensnared her family. Her wide, watchful eyes slowly filled with a cautious hope as she listened, her small hands clutching the worn fabric of a blanket provided for her safety. The plan was twofold. First, they would extract Zephyr from the precarious environment that threatened to consume her, moving her to a secure location where she could finally experience the care and protection every child deserves. Second, the team would launch a coordinated operation to intercept a planned gathering of the criminal syndicate, a meeting that the intelligence suggested was pivotal to the network's operations. This dual approach, though fraught with risk, was their best chance to not only rescue the innocent but also to cripple the nefarious organization once and for all. Preparations for the extraction were painstakingly arranged. Gideon personally oversaw the process, ensuring that every detail, from the timing of the extraction to the discreet passage through back alleys, was calculated with precision. He recalled the weight of his earlier vow, and each step taken in that dimly lit safe house felt like a deliberate march toward reclaiming a lost sense of justice. His team, composed of seasoned officers and a few trusted volunteers who had witnessed the tragic consequences of the network's corruption, rehearsed their roles with unwavering determination. Every signal, every shadowy route, was mapped out to perfection in a series of quiet, resolute discussions. As dusk approached on the day of the operation, tension mingled with the crisp autumn air. In a low, steady murmur that resonated with shared purpose, Gideon and his comrades navigated the deserted streets, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed dance. The city, usually so loud and indifferent, now seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the momentous events unfolding within its hidden corners. At a predetermined location, a secluded warehouse on the outskirts, now serving as the syndicate's meeting place, the team assumed their positions. Their presence was masked by the shroud of night, every step a testament to the sacrifices made in the name of justice. Inside the building, tension was palpable. Gideon's heart pounded with the gravity of the situation as he led a small squad toward the area where Zephyr was temporarily kept. His mind raced with memories of past failures and personal losses, fueling a fervent determination not to let history repeat itself. With quiet signals exchanged and eyes alert to every sound, the team moved as one, a force committed to the protection of the innocent. Every shadow, every creak of the aged floorboards, was scrutinized with an intensity that bordered on the desperate. In the midst of this operation, unexpected complications emerged. A miscommunication in one corridor nearly jeopardized the entire extraction. For a fleeting moment, chaos threatened to overtake their carefully laid plans. But with unwavering composure, Gideon reassumed control, his voice firm yet compassionate as he guided his team through the turbulent moment. His calm in the face of adversity became the anchor that steadied everyone's nerves. The crisis was diffused through quick thinking and the collective expertise of his allies, and once more the delicate balance between risk and resolution was restored. After what felt like an eternity of cautious maneuvering and heart-stopping uncertainty, the moment of extraction arrived. Zephyra, with eyes still reflecting both fear and tentative hope, was led gently out of the danger zone. The transition from that perilous environment into the secure confines of the safe house was laden with silent promises, promises of protection, of healing, and of a future where the shadows of the past would no longer dictate the course of her life. As she crossed the threshold, the soft murmur of supportive words from Gideon and his team filled the space, infusing it with a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold, hostile world they had just left behind. Outside, the operation continued with relentless precision. The team set in motion the secondary plan to intercept the syndicate's meeting, knowing that dismantling the criminal network would be essential in preventing future tragedies. As dawn began to break, its pale light cutting through the lingering darkness, Gideon surveyed the scene with a mix of exhaustion and hope. Every challenge faced during the extraction had deepened his resolve and reaffirmed his belief in the power of unity and compassion. The operation was far from over, and the coming hours would demand courage beyond measure. Yet, in that moment, the successful rescue of Zephyra stood as a shining beacon, a clear sign that even amidst the darkest storms, there existed a resilient spark capable of igniting change. In the quiet aftermath of the operation, as the first rays of the sun painted the sky with hues of promise, Gideon allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The journey ahead remained fraught with danger and uncertainty, but the rescue had provided a renewed sense of purpose. Every step taken that night, every perilous maneuver and every act of quiet heroism, reaffirmed his belief that protecting the innocent was worth every risk. The team dispersed silently, each member carrying the memory of that night in their hearts, a night that marked not an end, but the beginning of a relentless pursuit for justice, hope and redemption for those whose lives had been marred by a legacy of betrayal. Under the cloak of a moonless night, as the final remnants of darkness surrendered to the impending glow of dawn, Gideon and his team found themselves on the precipice of a final, harrowing confrontation. The intelligence they had painstakingly gathered pointed to a secretive gathering in a decrepit industrial facility, a meeting that, if disrupted, would irreparably cripple the criminal network once and for all. The air was thick with tension as Gideon surveyed the scene from a hidden vantage point. Every distant murmur and shuffle within the building was amplified by the pounding of his heart, a constant reminder that the lives of countless innocents hung in the balance. In the moments before the operation, Gideon recalled every detail of the past weeks, the whispered warnings, the tearful confessions of former accomplices, and the relentless pursuit of truth that had led him to this fateful juncture. Each step of the investigation had revealed another layer of deception, another link in a chain of betrayal that had long strangled the community. Now, standing at the threshold of a darkened doorway, he felt the gravity of his responsibility with every breath. With precise, silent signals exchanged among his team, they moved as a single, well-practiced unit, their presence cloaked by the shadows that clung to the crumbling walls of the facility. Inside, the scene was chaotic yet meticulously organized. Men in tailored suits and grim expressions gathered around a makeshift table, their conversation a low hum of conspiratorial voices. It was evident that they had grown accustomed to secrecy and subterfuge. Gideon's eyes caught sight of a man at the head of the table, a man whose cold, calculating gaze and authoritative demeanor marked him as a key player in the syndicate. As the officer's team inched closer, a sudden commotion erupted. One of the conspirators had grown suspicious, and the murmur of voices escalated into shouts. The sound of scuffling feet and hurried whispers set off a chain reaction, igniting panic among the gathered criminals. The coordinated strike began in an instant. Gideon's team surged forward with well-rehearsed precision, their flashlights cutting through the darkness in sharp, staccato bursts. A cacophony of shouts, clanging metal, and the echo of rapid footsteps filled the vast, abandoned warehouse. Amid the turmoil, Gideon led a smaller contingent directly toward the central meeting area. His focus was absolute as he advanced, each movement deliberate and steeped in the knowledge that failure was not an option. In the heart of the chaos, the standoff reached its climax. The key conspirator, who had been orchestrating the meeting, attempted to retreat into a hidden room behind a stack of old crates. Gideon and his partner intercepted him in a narrow corridor, the tension palpable in every strained breath. With adrenaline surging, the confrontation unfolded in a flurry of words and actions. The conspirator's voice trembled as he tried to justify his actions, revealing fragments of a larger plan that had ensnared not only the corrupt elites but also unsuspecting citizens who had been pawns in their nefarious game. Time seemed to slow as the confrontation deepened. In that charged moment, the conspirator's defiance faltered before the relentless determination in Gideon's eyes. With every passing second, it became clear that the power structure that had thrived in the shadows was beginning to crumble. Outside the corridor, the rest of the syndicate scrambled in disarray. Officers rounded up those who attempted to flee, securing them with quiet efficiency as evidence of their crimes was methodically gathered. The operation, designed with surgical precision, unfolded like a well-rehearsed play, a scene in which every actor had a role in the downfall of a corrupt empire. As the dust of confrontation settled, Gideon found himself amidst a mosaic of subdued voices and the heavy scent of fear and regret. The syndicate's leaders, now disoriented and cornered, had no choice but to surrender. In the aftermath, the once unyielding facade of authority had crumbled, replaced by a stark, undeniable truth: the legacy of deceit had met its reckoning. Gideon paused amidst the lingering echoes of chaos, his gaze drifting to a shattered window where the first light of dawn began to filter in. In that reflective moment, the weight of the past and the promise of a new beginning converged. The operation's success was not measured solely by the arrests made or the evidence seized, but by the tangible shift in the atmosphere of the facility, a transformation from one of clandestine dread to the hopeful stirrings of accountability and reform. The shattered remnants of the syndicate's control lay strewn about like discarded debris, a powerful symbol that even the most entrenched corruption could be dismantled by steadfast determination and the unyielding pursuit of justice. As the team regrouped in the cool, early light of morning, Gideon's thoughts turned to Zephyra. The successful disruption of the meeting meant more than just the fall of a criminal network, it was the first step toward dismantling the legacy of pain that had haunted her life. With the conspirators in custody and the evidence now irrefutable, the pathway to healing and redemption for all those who had suffered began to emerge. Standing among his exhausted but resolute colleagues, Gideon felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was not yet over, but the events of that tumultuous night had laid a foundation for a brighter, safer future, a future where truth and justice, once obscured by darkness, could finally flourish in the light of day. In the soft glow of an early morning sun, a new day unfolded over a town that had once been cloaked in the shadows of corruption and despair. The events of the previous night still echoed in the minds of all who had been part of the operation, yet there was an undeniable sense of renewal in the air. Officer Gideon Corbin stood at the edge of a quiet park, watching as the first beams of light danced upon dew-laden grass. In that moment, he reflected on the long and arduous journey that had brought him to this point, a journey marked by heartache, sacrifice, and moments of breathtaking courage. In the days following the dramatic takedown of the syndicate, the town began to stir with the promise of change. News of the operation spread quickly, carried on the whispers of grateful citizens and echoed in local headlines that spoke of justice finally prevailing over decades of hidden treachery. Gideon, now regarded as both a dedicated officer and a reluctant guardian, found himself inundated with heartfelt thanks from families who had long suffered under the weight of fear. Among them was the community that had once watched Zephyra Monroe with wary eyes. Now, they saw her as a symbol of resilience, a living testament to the possibility of healing even the deepest of wounds. Zephyra, once a frightened and silent child, blossomed in the newfound security provided by a loving foster family carefully chosen for her by community advocates. In her new home, filled with warmth, gentle laughter, and the comforting presence of those who truly cared, she began to reclaim the innocence that had been so brutally stolen from her. The days grew brighter as she attended a small, local school, where caring teachers and supportive peers helped her discover the joys of learning and friendship. Slowly, the heavy veil of sorrow that had once shrouded her eyes began to lift, replaced by a spark of hope that promised a future full of possibility. For Gideon, the successful operation was more than a professional victory, it was deeply personal. In the quiet moments after the storm of confrontation, he allowed himself to acknowledge the scars of his own past that had been stirred by this case. Memories of loss and moments of regret mingled with the warmth of recent triumphs, and he recognized that the struggle for justice was as much an internal battle as it was an external one. Each piece of evidence uncovered, every whispered secret that had finally seen the light of day, had not only dismantled a dangerous network but had also offered him a measure of redemption for his own long-hidden pains. In his solitary reflections during long nights at the precinct, he often thought of the countless souls, both lost and surviving, whose stories had shaped his relentless pursuit of the truth. In the weeks that followed, the courtrooms became stages for a remarkable reckoning. The trial that ensued was a culmination of years of investigative work, where powerful figures were held accountable for their misdeeds. The proceedings were thorough and painstaking, with witnesses coming forward to share their testimonies and newly unearthed documents laying bare the extent of the corruption. As the verdicts were handed down, the community felt a palpable shift, a liberation from the oppressive silence that had once seemed invincible. The dismantling of the syndicate, piece by piece, brought with it a sense of justice that resonated deeply with everyone affected. Even as the legal battles drew to a close, the transformation within the town was just beginning. Local leaders, inspired by the courage of those who had fought for change, launched initiatives to rebuild and reform institutions long tainted by nepotism and neglect. Public forums were held, where citizens and officials alike discussed ways to create a safer, more transparent community. The scars of the past were not erased overnight, but with each heartfelt conversation and each policy change, a foundation was laid for a future where trust could be restored and where the vulnerable would never again be left unprotected. For Gideon, standing at the crossroads of justice and personal healing, there was a profound sense of closure, and yet, also the realization that the journey of reform was never truly complete. In quiet moments, he found solace in the small victories, a smile from Zephyrah as she played in a sunlit yard, the genuine gratitude in the eyes of a family who finally felt safe, and the firm handshake of a community member who had once doubted the possibility of change. These were the moments that redefined his commitment to service, reminding him that every sacrifice made in the pursuit of justice was ultimately an investment in a brighter tomorrow. As the town embraced its new beginning, a gentle peace settled over the lives that had been so deeply affected by the past. Gideon continued his work, not just as an officer, but as a guardian of hope and a steadfast reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of compassion and perseverance could guide the way to redemption. And in that enduring light, the promise of a better future, one filled with healing, reconciliation, and lasting change, shone ever brighter.